Hey there! Welcome to Culture by Culture, a multidimensional exploration of Black and Asian pop cultural ties. I'm your nerdy host, Delia, and today I'm joined by creator and writer, Sebastian.
Hello! What's
Hi.
up? I am so happy to be here.
I am so excited to have you. Like, you have no idea. Before we jump into it, I was already immediately going to jump into it. Let's take a moment, pause, and let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Mars, like the planet. Word to my Tumblr followers who named me that years ago. I like to say that I am a Tumblr has-been, former influencer. Former influencer who's just kind of making their happiness and creating nerdy things whenever I can. I do like freelancing for brand clients and stuff. And one of the things that I like to do is I'm fighting evil by moonlight, which is helping brands diversify their content while winning love by daylight, which is being an author and a poet and a singer and performer. So a lot of the things, just love the arts and love to have a lot of fun while doing it. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
Thank you for saying that. That's so funny that you call yourself a Tumblr has-been. That's amazing. I will say, I did not know this. I don't know if this I was not on Tumblr in Tumblr's heyday, unfortunately. I very much should have been, but I always found it very intimidating, so I wasn't out there.
Real.
So we first kind of got connected through Black Nerds Create, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, it's Mars. And I was like, oh, and they were like, you weren't on Tumblr circa? And I was like, oh, no, I was not that cool of a kid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Tumblr was it. I mean, I was on Tumblr and I still use it periodically, but I was on Tumblr, I think, when I was like 13, 14, and then it was just a long way through. So that period was around my college years. Like, it was just after Blackout Day happened in 2015. And so that was that. I very much was like, I'm Tumblr famous. And like, I said it.
You were, though.
Like unironically. And it's really cute. Like, becoming an older adult now, I'm like, oh my God, you precious, like, sweet summer child. But
so
again,
cute.
That time was, oh my God, it really did feel just so magical for Black nerds. And so it's nice that I have my staple community from then and that people also recognize me sometimes, which is like both embarrassing and super sweet.
I think that's awesome. Of the platforms to be famous on, honestly, Tumblr, she that girl, especially during that time period. She that girl.
That time period. Lots of discourse, lots of Steven Universe arguments, but we were here. We're here. We're here.
We made it, for better or worse.
We sure did.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on. For listeners, my plan has always been to ask Mars to come on, like forever and always, because we have a shocking amount of fandom overlap, I found. And that's just been through our process of being mutuals. Like, all the time, Mars will be watching something and I'm like,
period. Twinsies. Twinsies.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited to nerd out and just chit chat about that. But I wanted to start with, because this is a podcast, it's not just a podcast for fanning out, but also it's about the intersection of Black and Asian pop culture. So to start us off, to have a starting point, what was your first foray into Asian pop culture, and how did you first get into whatever fandom or thing that was?
Absolutely. So I like to tell the joke that being a little kid, I was very much like Toonami after school, right?
All right.
And so it was Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon as my staples. And so I like to make the joke that because, I use both they, them, and she, her pronouns. I like to say she, her in a Dragon Ball Z way and they, them in a Sailor Moon way.
Wait. I love it. Yes. You don't need a better explanation. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Those were my two. So, coming home after school, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, on Toonami. Very much that was my first exposure. And then, of course, there were the smaller shows that showed Hamtaro, a little bit of Yu Yu Hakusho.
Hamtaro!
Right. And then I would wake up on Saturday mornings on Fox and then watch things like Digimon and Pokemon and all that stuff. So it was very much anime, which of course still an anime girly through and through to this day. But anime, I think, was the very first oh, this is different from what is on TV elsewhere. And it's because this TV comes from a different country. And that was I was 5 years old. I'm like, like, oh my gosh, other countries have TV shows. Like, that's crazy.
There are other countries outside of the US. When you
There are
become
other places.
aware of that as a kid, wow, it is game changing.
There are truly other places, and they have, content that slaps, and it's interesting and it's cool. And I lost a tooth once because I jumped off of a couch trying to do the magical girl transformation. Yep, I sure did.
Stop.
I sure did. And I used to go like, go Super Saiyan on the playground and stuff like that. So Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, very near and dear to my heart, will probably always be,
That is so cute. So that's like really young. I've told my story before. My dad liked anime, so my family was already like
cool.
aware and on board.
Yeah.
But I wonder, did your family, were they nerds? Did they know, like, what did they think of this interest of yours? You're going Super Saiyan and trying to break in a tooth, doing this magical girl transformation.
It's so funny because like my parents knew that I loved it, right? But it wasn't actually until my brother Jupiter, who's the middle child, also like super got into anime. And then like my parents were like, oh, she loves it. And then of course I had my K-pop and K-drama phase, and like I still deeply enjoy K-dramas and stuff like that. But my parents were very much like, okay, that's the thing she's into. Where my parents and I more closely align is our love for Marvel and like Western comics. But yeah, for for anime stuff, they were just kind of like, okay, those are the little cartoon things. And they were like, why do their eyes look like that? Which is always the question I tried to draw, and it would always be, why do their eyes look like that? And it's like, it's the style, okay? I don't know. That's not how a human pupil looks. I don't know. Take that up with whoever.
Well,
I don't know. Like,
I'd argue nobody looks like Captain America in real life.
Right?
Like that's,
like open up your minds and your imaginations, people. But yeah, no, they were it's like, okay, cool. And now recently my mom has been very, very into anime. So my brother and I have been
very cool.
Yeah. So like, let's revisit that. Like, let's make sure we revisit that as a conversation. But it's an interesting kind of difference between then and now, where I can really bond with my mom over anime. It's a very new and fresh feeling. But yeah, they were just kind of like, okay, cool. She likes what she likes. I was a kid who had a lot of different passions and was doing a lot of different types of things, because this was all happening at the same time. I was like a musical theater kid and performing, and like
that's very specific energy.
I like to joke that I've collected the nerd infinity stones. Like I have covered so many.
Truly. That's what I was like, wow, that's just really two completely separate areas. That's
just a lot of stuff going on.
That's super cool. I don't think I was quite as nerdy about it. Like, I was a big nerd, but into anime, it was more passive, I think. But also my dad was a nerd, so it wasn't like a weird thing. The more concerning for my parents was that I was so into Harry Potter, and like they were very Christian. They were like, what's going on?
My parents.
This might be a problem. So I didn't really have that experience per se. But I did want to talk about, and you're going to be like, whoa, you're really taking it back. So a long time ago, and this just has stuck in my head, you talked about on Twitter, and maybe elsewhere, but I saw it on Twitter, as you do, how you started an anime club.
Oh my God. Yes.
And that stuck with me because like, I don't know very many people. People also remember when I had Sheila on, the band, on the podcast, one of the members, she was also into anime, like as a kid, like into it. And I just find I don't meet a lot of Black people who were into anime like very actively and openly at that age who are around our age. Does that make sense? Like, I know a lot of Black people came to it later, or they were like in it, but not like super into it, like actively like doing weeb stuff.
Yeah. Like weeb stuff. Yes.
So it's always stuck into my head like, oh my gosh, they like fully started an anime club as a Black person at that time. And so I just want to know, the question is just tell me everything.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. So the year is, oh Lord, what year was that? I was a sophomore in high school, and it was so tough to be a female nerd. I mean, it's always really tough to be a female nerd, right? But to your point, anime has, its positioning in pop culture has shifted overall, across all races. Anime is a cooler thing now. I mean, of course, people who are like, you freaking like weirdos, of course, are going to always be persistent.
Yeah.
But, back in 2007, 2008, like the subculture was pretty like it was an uphill battle.
It really was.
Like it really, really was. And then specifically with Black male nerds, of course, dominating the conversation, which, ask me about that and I'm gonna get on my soapbox about it. But
Ciao.
I really, really wanted to start an anime club with my friends at the time because, we were a group of, I would pretty solidly say like outcasts-ish. Again, this was high school and I was also a performing arts student. So like I had a really specific like positioning within like, what is popular, quote unquote popular versus uncool. I was also super, super nerdy academic. Like I was just solidly nerd. And we really wanted to start an anime club because, of course, we were the weebs who were bonding over it, and begged my literature teacher because he was the only teacher who we could justify sponsoring. We were like, please, Mr. Reynolds, like, shout out to him. We were like, please, please, please. And he was like, on certain conditions, like yada, yada, yada. And so we started the club. We met only a few times because what ended up happening is I was really, even in my nerddom, I approach things really academically, right? I love the study of creation of things as well. I love to know why they chose that color. What's the symbolism here? What's the thing there? It's why literature, of course, no surprise, was my favorite class besides science. And the idea that I had in my head, poor 14-year-old me was like, yeah, we're going to basically, because, it's literature, it's a literature teacher. We're going to be able to like study our anime and our manga in like really cool, interesting ways beyond.
You were out nerding the nerds.
Which again, this is still how I approach. I mean, of course, I love anime where things just blow up and it just looks cool. Like, of course.
Yeah.
But, and so I was like, okay, we're going to watch Neon Genesis Evangelion.
And
we're gonna
textually analyze it.
Oh my God. And we're gonna do this. And I just grossly underestimated the power of a nerdy teenage boy, a nerdy teenage Black boy. And then a gaggle of nerdy teenage Black boys, because we just could not get everybody to be normal. We're like, guys, be so normal, please. We had arguments and fighting and like, unfortunately, like casual sexual harassment of me and the one other girl in the room. All of the icky sticky, no pun intended, was just there. And then our teacher had twin baby girls. And then he said, I'm not doing this shit no more. Y'all are some little weirdos. Love you down. But like, no. And it was so short-lived. And I remember being livid. I was so hurt. I was so hurt because again, this it didn't even last a month. I was like, please, you guys. And it was something else. Like, so I just continued to watch anime by myself. And of course, like connected with the other girl she was one of my best friends at the time. And we were watching K-dramas and stuff together. So we just clinged to each other. Like, I'm just like, okay, it's just me and you, girl. And then of course, after high school, we all graduated, went our separate ways.
Yeah.
But I still think about those guys a lot. I wonder where they are because I'm just kind of like, do you know you ruined my high school anime club dreams? I was vice president for a month, but it's okay.
Who was president? Do I need to ask?
Oh my gosh, they made one of the boys president because
I figured.
Oh, but it was his idea to have the club, and it's like, okay, but did he persuade the teacher, and did he do the thing, and did he da da da? Anyway, it was just misogyny.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. That's a big facet of anime fandom of that time, actually. So very unsurprising. But that's why I wanted to know the story, because I was like, yo, to even attempt to do that, I would never have even dreamed to do that at that time.
In Atlanta.
Like, I just didn't even occur to me. That's wild. I think a good chunk of my listeners are anime fans, but I don't know if their anime fandom was active at that time. And it was just, like Mars is saying, such a different time, like across the board. Misogyny, big big facet.
Mhm.
But then in the black section of the fandom, which also wasn't big, let's also recognize that because of also the racism in fandom. Misogynoir, huge, really did the numbers.
Massive problems. And then just it was just a lot. I think it was actually the first space that I recognized like, oh, you can be brilliant in a room full of men and nobody will care, because like even the teacher was kind of just blasé, like he was a little checked out of everything. And I do remember being like, Mr. Reynolds, they won't listen to me. And he was just kind of like, what can you do? And I'm like, I mean, what can I do? But also like
you can do something though.
Like you can do something. And of course the politics of, we could get into the racial, because the teacher was white. These are all black kids. It's a lot. Let me tell you, like there is literally no, I'm like, wow, like the nostalgia of it. I'm like, wow,
a real microcosm of bigger systems. But it's so true about like being in that particular fandom space. It really does feel like that. If you were in the fandom space at that age, this realization of like, oh, there's no amount that I can be into this enough for these boys at the time
literally
to accept that I know what I'm talking about.
Literally that. And like I have faith, like I just continue to face that. I mean, I'm almost 30 now, and you get into a long enough conversation with a man about anything nerdy sometimes, and it's just kind of like, I'm so surprised you, like literally 2 months ago, someone was like, I didn't know girls were into anime. I'm like, first of all, I'm not a girl.
Stop.
We're grown.
It is 2023.
And also it is literally 2023. That's so embarrassing that you said that out loud and like you didn't hear yourself say it. And then immediately
Megan Thee Stallion exists. Like start there.
And also like my knowledge of these literal things is what I use professional. Like I'm a professional. At this point, it is almost academic level study of the things. So strange. Not to be like, I know more than you, but be normal, and maybe you might discover that I do know a little bit more than you think, and then we can have a normal bonding conversation about the media we enjoy. But
I've never really understood, even though I experienced it a lot being an anime fandom at that time, video game fandom, like, or even like alternative music at the time, because that was my preferred music at the time. You could just never know enough. And I still don't understand where that comes from, because you would think, because then on the flip side, especially a lot of the time, black boys will be like, oh, well, girls don't want anime nerds, yada, yada, yada. Right. And it's like, well, if you were just normal, I don't know. Like,
we could just be, because I will tell you, I mean, what ended up going on the next year between myself and another one, like one of the boys who was in that club, was essentially, I thought we were friends. And he asked me to prom, and I thought we were going as friends.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. And he was a sweetie pie, but again, I thought we were friends. And then somehow all the rest of the nerd boys found out what I did to him, quote, quote, quote. And then I remember like getting pulled aside in the hallway by one of them, and they were like, yo, how could you do my boy like that? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, bro, I thought we were just like up late talking about like whatever show he was. I think he was watching like Gurren Lagann at the time or whatever. And I was like, it's one of those things where I listen to you ramble because like cool, and I know and I understand. Like I love when people listen to me ramble. But I thought we were cool and kicking it. But yeah, no. So there's definitely like a really specific flavor of misogynoir that like incredibly frustrating when it comes from our black men in nerdy spaces. But anyway, we don't have time to get into all that.
I will say I get it even now with this podcast, not so much like in response to the podcast directly, but like on the social accounts. I'm like, I have a whole account devoted to this stuff. Like, yeah, I know. Thank you. I know. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Like all the time. I think most of them mean well. I have to believe that to keep my sanity about it. But the amount of people who've been like, you need to cover Wu-Tang. Do you know about Wu-Tang? I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I do. Thank you. Thank you for your input. Like
eventually.
It goes on and on.
Yeah, if you want to, you will. And if you don't want to, you don't gotta.
Yeah, exactly. But that said, being that you are, I guess you could call yourself a fandom old head, I would say.
I think so.
You've been in these streets.
My knee hurts just enough that I'm like, it's fine. I'm transitioning. It's okay.
I've earned the badge. You're right. Yeah. What would you say is different about your experience as a black fan those days versus now in these spaces?
Well, for one thing, I mean, I love how, people older than us, and then also people younger than us are just really, really good at curating Black nerd spaces. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course, like in, from like 2010 to 2017, the advent
Mm-hmm.
of things like Off Color, shout out to Off Color, woo, woo, woo. And
Shout
like,
out.
Black Girl Gamers and like all these different, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all of us who have created all of these different spaces, right? Like you guys have one, like it's really cool
Mm-hmm.
that people who experienced that loneliness in that era we were just talking about then
Mm-hmm.
went on to curate these spaces that like so many of us now flock to as like cultural watering holes. Like I think that's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing. And then of course younger people are so good at community building just off rip. Of course they've got more
Mm-hmm.
apps and more access, and when Twitter wasn't falling apart, like
Right.
they grew up in a really specific like digital native way
Mm-hmm.
that like was like, okay, great. So they were off to the races in terms of their fandom. Anime TikTok tickles me. Like it is so strange over there. It's a little too strange for me, which I'm like,
Wow.
go
Yeah.
on, which I've had self. Um, but I'm delighted by it. Like you have so many choices now. Like it really used to feel
Mm-hmm.
like I would have to be printing out my little fan fiction and reading it in secret. Or when
Oh,
I used to be a huge fan of TVXQ / DBSK, depending on which language you're speaking.
I was going to
Um,
ask. Okay, go on.
I was a huge fan of theirs. And so I had like printed out pictures of them to put them in my clear binders. Like,
Yeah.
and I used to get
Oh, flashback.
hooked. People used to be cooking me like, who are these random Asian boys you got on your binder? And now we're watching Blackpink and BTS, and all
Mm-hmm.
of these people just like explode across pop culture in a way that is incredibly delightful. And so that is just the hugest difference. And I celebrate it. Like it can be a little frustrating, of course, because, with the way that we have gotten into the habit around the media we love, we've gotten kind of into the habit of really being super intense about, like, we've always been
Mm-hmm.
super intense, but the connectivity comes with like conflict in ways that
Yeah.
I think the heyday of Tumblr is a perfect example of like how we started being like, and then if you don't like this, you are this, and I hate
Yeah.
you a lot, in
Yep.
ways that
Yep. Yep.
are now have like escalated to, danger. And then of
Mm-hmm.
course within the communities, it's like who has access, who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all good. And I really enjoy the culture for what it is right now with all its
Mm-hmm.
problems. Like I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel similarly. Like the space curation piece of it, especially, just is something I don't think little me could have ever dreamed of. Like
Mhm.
I don't even know if I thought to dream of it. Like that's the level it was at. Like I went to regular anime conventions and they weren't literally all white, but they might as well have been the way
Mhm.
it felt going to these conventions. And I just accepted that as, oh, that's the norm. If you're going to cosplay as Itachi, you're going to be Blitachi because you're Black Itachi,
Mhm.
obviously. Like, that's a real life example that
Mhm.
I went through. And that was just the norm. So I didn't even think to dream of better. And so knowing that people like my little sister, because we're a big age difference,
Mhm.
her friends grew up and could just be in this world where it's very normal to be able to connect with your people in whatever fandom you come to.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
really nice
so,
for them.
yeah, it's so nice. I love it. And yes, there are problems. And I hope that in time we'll solve for those too. But it's just so much better than what it used to be.
That, and like again, if people aren't like cooking you for like, of course, because people are like, oh, the K-pop girlies, and like, child, y'all just don't like fun.
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
let me not be dismissive. Like there's a lot of conversation to be had about K-pop specifically. But
Oh, for sure.
I'm like, wow, like I went from getting cooked for liking this boy band and having them in my binder to like watching them break international records. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, oh my gosh. And like tour in the United States. Cause I'm like, I would have given everything to be 14 years old and to see DBSK like, oh my gosh. And then I managed to be able to like see BTS like in a
Mm-hmm.
smaller like venue. And like that's it's again like to your point about not even being able to imagine the
Mm-hmm.
access
Mm-hmm.
that we have now. Like it's insane. I love it so much.
I sometimes wish, like, when I have conversations with my little sister, I'm like, I just wish you could see what it was like to just appreciate what it is now because It was so different. So different. With that said, we've covered a lot of the past. I want to know, well, I kind of know. I want the listeners to know what your current active Asian pop culture fandoms are.
Ooh, okay. So again, still super into anime. All of the really popular ones I have seen, if not, well, I've tried Bleach. I got 150 episodes into Bleach and was like,
Whoa.
I don't know if I can do this, but I tried though. One Piece also tried, cannot do it, but grew up okay, and like with Sailor Moon and DBZ. Naruto was really the like, oh, I am 13 and I'm transitioning from being a child to kind of being like a teen and being like, wow.
Yeah.
So Naruto is one of my babies. My favorite of all time is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. My followers know I have seen it. I watch it at least twice a year.
Whoa.
Yes. I watch it when I'm sad, which is like, I gotta be like in the trenches.
If that's your like pick me up, whoa.
But it's because like it's the kind of body of work where I'm like, you can just see the intentional storytelling from the very first episode. And of course, I love a story that breaks my heart. And so like, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is my favorite of all time. But I'm currently like, loving and watching. Of course, I've been watching My Hero Academia from the start, read all of Demon Slayer, crying through the Demon Slayer stuff as it comes out. What else am I super into? Vinland Saga is one that I watched with my mom. I haven't finished it yet, but she finished it and she's like, hurry up and finish it so we can talk about it. I'm like, I know, girl. But Vinland Saga is one I'm really into. And then I really just love sports anime. I think sports anime is actually my favorite genre.
I just started dabbling in it. I've
really
finished Haikyuu. I haven't read the manga, so I know like the manga goes further and that the show hasn't. So no spoilers.
Yeah, I haven't gotten.
I'm supposed to be reading the manga, but yeah, I watched that. My friend convinced me. She was like, "I swear you will love it," and she just has really good taste. And I was shout out Janae, and she was just like, "You should be watching this." And so I watched it. I was like, oh, because I'm not a sports girly at all, like not even a little bit. But let me tell you, I feel like I could go watch volleyball now and actively enjoy it because that's how the sports anime gets you.
That's how they get you. That's exactly my experience. I started Haikyuu on a whim. It was my first sports anime, and I was like, oh, the sport is a vehicle of the storytelling. It's not necessarily just about the playing of the sport. And Haikyuu is one that in the genre I think specifically stands out because as many sports anime that are really, really good at doing the whole like, teamwork, never give up, follow your dreams, work hard, you will fail, but stand back up sort of narration. Like, there's something about Haikyuu that I'm just like, wow. There are so many standout moments that I can't think of right now that just really moved me. But Haikyuu is something special. I also like, there's like two flavors of sports anime. There's like the cute, like sort of normal, really wholesome, like really get into it, really learn these people and understand their motivations sports anime. And then there's like the Super Saiyan sports anime. Like it's the Kuroko no Basuke, it's the Blue Lock. Like, so I watch sports anime when I really need a like a kick in the pants. Like it's very much you feel down, but like, come on, kid, you gotta rally. I really love sports anime in general. Although I admit I need to watch more shoujo. I really do, because I've fallen off of it a little bit. But I love a romance. I love romantic. I'm like, oh my God. So like I've seen like some of the classics like Kami-sama Kiss, Ranma One Half, like those things. Other than that, other than like super anime stuff, I've fallen off of a little bit of K-pop. I don't listen to it as much as I used to, but I do have an entire playlist of like, I think they're called like K-pop bangers. Like it's my playlist name.
Okay.
It's usually like they sang an opening for an anime. Oh, there's a Korean version. Let me go check it out. Or what I see the girlies like posting on Twitter to go viral. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. I think that's how I discovered Stray Kids. I was like, oh, look at these young people. I feel so old.
Not young people. I mean, I also have that reaction sometimes, but it's like very jarring when you realize that you've called like, oh, look at this young person. It's like a 20-year-old. You're like,
and I only just turned 29, but I am feeling the difference. I really, really am. But other than that, I mean, I'm tearing through almost every K-drama on Netflix right now. I have seen a lot of them, and I just finished like Dr. Cha. That one was so good.
Oh, it was so
Oh,
good.
so good. And then I also really love King, the Eternal Monarch.
Oh, I haven't watched that
Oh,
yet.
that one's real good too. It's a little confusing,
That's
but
what I heard. The storytelling, it gets a little shaky
I guess
sometimes,
it's a little
but
shaky, but also everyone is so beautiful in it. Everyone's
yeah,
so
that's Lee
hot.
Min-ho.
Everyone's so hot.
And who else is in it? The girl from Goblin? Is that who's in it?
Yes. Oh my
Yeah,
God, which
okay.
I love. Goblin is such a good one too. Like, oh
Oh.
man. And right now I think I'm gonna go back and like rewatch some of the classics that I was just too young to really understand, like Coffee
Mhm.
Prince and stuff.
You have to watch Coffee Prince.
I'm
Oh no, we're giving out homework on the podcast. You have to watch Coffee
going to
Prince.
watch Coffee Prince. And then there's another one called Rain or Shine that just like shattered my heart to itty bitty bits that I really loved. And then of course the really funky, like fun, like sci-fi leaning ones like Abyss.
Oh, Abyss was
Abyss
good.
was fun.
Yeah, I
Um,
enjoyed that one.
I really loved Abyss. And then I like the crime shows too, like Bad and Crazy, which the twist in Bad and Crazy, I was like, whoa, that blew my
Oh, I
mind.
haven't seen Bad and Crazy, but I really like crime ones. I like law and like crime dramas. Those are like
Hmm.
my second favorite. Like romance top always.
Hmm.
Crime and law solid second.
I love them a lot. So yeah, I've got a lot of different stuff that I've always been touching Asian culture somehow in what I consume. So
What is it that you think draws you to these cultures specifically in their stories?
mm, I really think it's interesting to get perspectives of other people of color and
Hmm.
understand how other people of color tell their stories.
Hmm.
And that just happened to be, of course, since I was young, like
Hmm.
Japanese specifically, culture just happened to be what I was like, oh, this is something that makes me feel not like I can relate necessarily. It's not a one-to-one relationship, right? But
Hmm.
it's again, if I'm a person who is deeply fascinated by the creation of art and storytelling, if I'm already consuming, Western media and Western cartoons and
Hmm.
or, American cartoons because my family is Antiguan. And so I am
Hmm.
learning of America through the media that I consume. If I'm
Hmm.
already kind of doing that, and then with my, little dabble of, exposure to Caribbean culture, it just
Hmm.
happened that like Japanese happened to be like the next thing, right?
Hmm.
And it was like, okay, I'm getting America and the West via musical theater and by merit of living here and living in New York, but I'm also getting the Caribbean here in New York. And I'm also
Hmm.
getting a whole lot of different exposure to a lot of different stuff. And, Toonami, again, shout out to Cartoon Network. And I think this is
Truly.
really why, again, not to get on my soapbox, but to get on my soapbox, this is why it's incredibly important to save and preserve international art in all of its forms, and also to empower studios and
Yep.
empower media channels and all that stuff to show these things and preserve them, and not
Hmm.
just write them off for tax purposes and then yank them off of your service,
Hmm.
because you never know whose life you're changing via exposure to these new things and via exposure to different cultures. Because
Absolutely.
I will tell you, the first time I watched Howl's Moving Castle, I don't know what it unlocked in me, but it unlocked in me, like it unlocked something,
Hmm.
right? Like I feel like
Hmm.
everyone can tell you what their favorite Studio Ghibli movie is, right?
Hmm.
And similarly, people can tell you what their favorite Marvel character is. We do
Hmm.
this all of the time. And so to feel like people won't have access to and like exposure to a lot of different things because
Because agreed.
decision makers at studios just don't want to understand and preserve and be respectful of animation overall, because the
Hmm.
entire like industry of animation across many cultures is really fighting for
Suffering.
their rights to
Yeah.
party. Like that sort of exposure was important. It's what I was shown as a kid, and it's stuck with me this whole time, and it's informed who I am as a person, as a creator, and also informs my imagination in ways that I you couldn't
Hmm.
have predicted that showing me Sailor Moon at 5 years old would mean that all these years later I'd be sitting here still just as passionate about the art and the medium in which these stories are being told, right? Like,
Hmm.
and now you have people like my mom, who, my mom is, again, grew up Christian from like from a small tiny island, like
Hmm.
is a mother of three and is already in her 50s, and she has always loved good stories. And so discovering that anime is just another wellspring of like wonderfully told, powerful stories, interesting characters, and like things that'll make you belly laugh and cry, and like that's magic. That discovery and that attachment to media, I think it's magic. And so more exposure for more people. Try an anime if you haven't tried it. It's fun.
Give anime a chance if you haven't tried it. You really are making me want to try and get my mom into anime. She's into K-dramas. I got that much, but she's never been into anime. She doesn't get it. And like, I can kind of understand from her perspective. All she's seen really of it is Dragon Ball Z, because that's my dad's favorite. So that's what stayed on in the house. But you're so right about it being tells these big, I say big stories. It does that too, but I think what I mean more so is deep, complex stories like that are rich. That is the word. They're so rich. And I just feel like she would really love them. And the fact that your mom came to it. Well, I don't know. When did she first start watching anime?
I mean, so the thing with having two children who are both really into anime and both really into super nerdy things, who are also really specifically ADHD, is that we will tell her, my brother especially, Jupiter, will tell her from start to finish what has happened in an entire season of like My Hero Academia. And I'm like, my sweet summer child. And of course, she's just kind of like, okay, sweetie. Oh, wow. Like,
That's good,
and
baby.
So,
yeah.
very much that. But again, it was very much like she just came across a couple different, of course, I know my mom's taste. She loves a historical drama.
Okay.
She loves like Viking dramas and stuff. So Vinland Saga, that's what I'm saying. There's something for everybody, right? I think of when Guillermo del Toro said like animation is like the medium, like remembering animation is the medium. Anime is the culturally specific medium. You know what I mean? And if you love something elsewhere, you of course are going to be really likely to like things that kind of fall into that thing. So of course, my mom probably wouldn't get Sailor Moon. She probably would very much not like DBZ, but something like Vinland Saga, perfect fit for her, right? And like the sort of like specificity and knowing how to onboard people and knowing how to recommend things to people is like sometimes we don't really know how to recommend things to people. We just kind of recommend
it's a
things.
Skill.
It's really a skill. Because there was another one on Netflix that she ended up watching that I was like, you're watching that? Oh, Blood of Zeus. Again, nerd Infinity Stones, also a Greek mythology girl. So she grew up hearing me scream about Greek mythology all the time. And so Blood of Zeus was very much like, oh, okay, like, of course you're kind of into that because you are already kind of into the historical stuff. The story of Blood of Zeus is something that I can see you being attracted to. And then like the animation is a certain style that, okay, like I get it, why you like that. And then right after Blood of Zeus, she was hungry for something else. And I told her, well, if you want to stay on Netflix, you can do Vinland Saga and see how you like it. And she tore straight through it, beat me to the season finale. And I'm like, girl, how? Okay. But yes, it's only been within like the last year and a half or so. But she's of course heard us talk about anime for years and years. So it was just, I think it was inevitable, you know?
Yeah, I guess I just need to talk about it more because I got her into K-dramas because I wouldn't stop talking about K-dramas. Well, between my little sister and I. My little sister is why all three of us like K-pop because she's been a BTS stan since like 2014 since she was like a kid.
Little baby. Yeah.
Yeah, she was like a baby out here standing these boys. And so my mom were finally like, okay, what's BTS all about independently? And then I got into K-dramas and wouldn't shut up about them. And so, or you could correct me if I'm wrong, Mom, if this is how it happened or not, because she listens to every episode. Hi, Mom. But yeah, so she's into it. So I would love for her to get into anime. And it just occurred to me that she will be listening to this. So what anime do you want to watch, Mom? Because I got recommendations for you.
I love giving a recommendation. I really, really do.
It's a skill set. It really is. Because I think what I've noticed, I've noticed it a lot with K-dramas in particular. A lot of people will just recommend the classics to people. And the issue with recommending the classics is, while they may have been your entry point at the time, they don't all hold up.
They don't all age as well as you think.
They do not all age well. No, they do not. And then also, if somebody doesn't like, say, romance or anything like that, don't recommend Coffee Prince. It's not going to be for them. They're not going to like K-dramas as a result of watching Coffee Prince. You got to recommend something more their speed,
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of people realize that sometimes.
And like sometimes you can get a little bit of both, specifically about K-dramas. Like I think about things like Abyss, because Abyss is both like sci-fi
Yeah.
and romance.
K-dramas do that so
They
well.
do it so well. And also what I love about a K-drama is like the self-contained like 12 to 16 episodes, like mwah,
Yep.
perfect, no notes. You always know that it's going to finish and there's no cancellation. You're like, oh, okay, great. I had a nice little time with this food on my plate, and now the food on my plate is finished. And whenever I want to return to that food, I can come back and have a little nibble and a little taste,
Exactly.
Yeah, no. Ask me about recommendations. I'm always happy. Like, I like this and this. What do you think I like? I got you.
But yeah, the stories of anime are so deep and rich, and I don't know what the difference is. And it's something I've been pondering as we've gone through this season of the podcast, is where I still can't figure out is like, okay, I get why we all have independently been drawn to these media, these stories. And I just can't put my finger on what is missing in Western media, though, that makes us seek that out. There's, the representation angle, not that there's Black people over there, like in their media so much, but like you were saying, just seeing perspectives of other people of color, seeing stories that aren't told from a white lens and through a white supremacist framework. But I just can't point my finger on from a storytelling aspect. What is missing in Western stories? Do you have any idea as a writer yourself?
I almost wonder if it's not the stories themselves at all, because you see people have like a really specific hunger for things like Steven Universe. They have a really specific hunger or like appreciation for things like Adventure Time or like regular show. But like, I wonder almost if like, because the industries of animation are just so different between what it takes to make an anime versus what it takes to make a cartoon here in the United States. I'm just wondering if it's a back end thing and the appreciation and the work that goes into it from not necessarily the artists or the writers, but from even higher up than that, from the like the studios or the execs or the media channels that they are distributed on. I'm wondering if we just see, because of course we are Americans, I'm wondering if we just see a little through the veil clearly to what those dysfunctions are.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the stories, because you have things like Craig of the Creek that don't get to end the way that we really would have wanted them to end. You have like really popular things like Gravity Falls that people really enjoyed. And like we do see just wonderfully powerful animated stories coming out from the United States and coming out from, our neighbors here in the West. But like, I'm wondering if it's like that, and then a combination of a little bit of the idea that like what is not American must then be higher end or more special simply because we are American and we think of ourselves as like a little less special comparatively to like, it might be a little like, is that confirmation bias? No, that's not the right term. But like, you know what I mean? Like it's very much like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But going back to the point about exposure, I think that's why exposure is so important, because I know I want to make it a point to consume more European animation and African animation, starting with, I think, South Africa, actually, just trying to like dive more into what animation looks and feels like, simply because I want to find out the answer to that question too, your original question, which is like, is there really a quote, like, gap between the stories being told elsewhere and the stories being told here? And is it because of, all the things that we are watching go down with the writer's strike and animation workers and all of these different things? Or is it specifically the microcosm of America just won't let animation be wonderful and powerful without having to go through like hurdle after hurdle after hurdle to get there? Because even like I know people loved the new Puss in Boots movie, right? Like people were everywhere for that, and they're like, the story is so good. And it's like, see, like great and amazing stories are being told here. The investment's just different. And so who knows? But that's a long, long way of being like, girl, I don't know either. But
I think you might be really close to it though. The investment piece is really critical, because you see in Japan with their animation, but also like Chinese animation and Korean animation, like they take the art form seriously. And that's not to say like, obviously the people who are making these shows here in the West, they take their art form seriously, but like all the way up, like at the industry level, like it's just the foundation that they're building on is one that just takes the craft seriously. Like, it
Right.
never was like, oh, that's for kids. Like, they didn't start from that point, which is where we're starting from it. And I think there's something to that, where like in the American consciousness at the foundation, when you have like industry execs and stuff, it's hard for them to understand that this can be more than that, which is also why Avatar popped off, because it was yes, it's a kid show, but the story takes itself seriously, takes its audience seriously. And you can just tell, like you said, kind of being able to see through that veil, that all the way up, they trusted and supported that show, you know?
It's very different. And like, again, I also invite challenge, because maybe maybe this is only because the only lens we can view this conversation in,
Right, right.
is as Americans. Maybe someone will come and be like, actually, specifically in Japan, people are very much like, anime is for children, leave it alone. And, or maybe, and again, this is artists across borders and industries who are also being taken advantage of, because I would also be remiss if we didn't like mention that, number one, the United States outsources a lot of its animation to the very regions that we're mentioning on this pod right now. And on top of that, like, they also too go through crunches. This is what any anime fan who's really paying attention will be like, oh, having to skip 2 weeks in a row, it's because you're crunching your animators and you're making them tired.
You can tell, you know, and it always feels bad when you know, or you can tell when an episode, the way it's animated, you're like, oh.
Like, y'all had no budget left and I see it. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. And so a lot of these problems are in a sense universal, and or, you know, ask me about capitalism another time. But
it comes up a lot on this podcast.
But like, it's something that we could spend, you know, I wonder how many people have done the research, because you could spend years trying to really map a one-to-one as to why animation does what it does within its cultural context, and how anime is just one of the ones that kind of just popped out and became global in a really specific sense. But now, of course, like, we are getting like more and more popular animes are based on webtoons, which are Korean, right? Like, there's a lot of interesting cultural diffusion happening within the worlds of animation right now. It's just really hard, because it's a little bit of xenophobia, a little bit of racism, a little bit of all the things. Getting people to try anything new when we can't even get proper support and or acknowledgement of our own great United States, like, Western cartoons. It's like pulling teeth. So it's a hard one. It's a hard problem. We're not gonna be able to solve that, because me and you, we don't got the problem. We don't got the
for sure. I'm like, I do not have the expertise to begin to solve it. And when I look at that problem, I'm like, is it solvable? Girl, I don't know. I don't know. But I know there are great minds at work trying to solve it. And so we'll leave that to them. I touched on a little bit briefly ago. I mentioned how maybe the thing drawing people to it is seeing stories from people of color, like Black people specifically being drawn to this media. It's like, oh, this is a way to interact with stories from people of color. Of course, like when you're talking about anime or K-dramas, it's not the same as taking in the stories of Asian Americans through that context, like coming from the context of like a Japanese animator or a K-drama actor or whatever the case may be. Like, they are the cultural majority. So the story is still very different and shouldn't be that relatable for us, but like, it's still the curiosity, I think, is part of it. But I did mention when I said that, I'm like, but it's not literal representation, because there's not very many Black people, if at all, in these works.
Exactly.
It's changing a little bit, I would say, in anime space. K-drama. So my question to you is, since you've been in the fandom as long, if not longer than me, in both of these fandoms, what are your thoughts on Black representation as it's gone through the years, and what do you wish to see on screen?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, to your point, again, like, it's not one-to-one representation, because it fascinates me to consume stories of people of color and know that they're people of color. But I think I would just really delight in more stories just honoring and understanding that Black people exist everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
Like, which is hard, because number one, anti-Blackness, we know, say it with me, anti-Blackness is global.
It's global, girl. Everybody.
And on top of that, like, even non-Black people of color contend with colorism in a way that is so different. I mean, you know, we know and understand colorism within really specific contexts as Black Americans. And then like, of course, within Africa and the Caribbean as well. But colorism within other people of colors, cultural conversations is something that is like, whoo, like
it's a different
like
thing.
it's a completely different ball game for them. And so if colorism within their own race is kicking their butt so hard, of course, like with anti-Blackness also being global, Black people are still either left entirely out of people's imaginations, or the parts of us that they feel are fun can get translated into their works. And then all the rest that they don't like, hate, revile, think are disgusting gets either made fun of within the work or like ignored, right? Like, so it's a very, it's hard. And so I'm not one for being like, everything has to have a Black person in it.
Right.
But also, when you're telling these stories and you're telling them in a really specific way, know that Black people can also be around and it doesn't have to be weird, right? Like, you don't have to do the Mr. Popo lips on your Black anime characters. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You do not have to do that. Jinx as a Pokemon does not need to look that way.
Oh my gosh.
I also would encourage more people and storytellers of every race to learn more about the history of Blackness within entertainment and media, because like, again, it's the lips, right? You don't know that those are things from blackface until right? Until you do that research, until you're exposed to that history. And then if you willingly choose to do that, then you're an asshole, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, don't design your Black characters that way. Like, it's just weird. You don't have to be racist to people who are in fandom, who are just looking for themselves and might imagine this character to be Black for a moment. Like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be all right, y'all. But again, open up your imaginations, learn more history, and know that people like Black Koreans exist. They are real and they also deserve representation. Black Japanese folks exist. They are real people and they deserve representation. It's what is hypothetical for some is real for others. And that's something that I am like, every single fandom I really need to like hammer home. Hypothetically speaking is one thing on Twitter or on Tumblr, wherever you're arguing about, but there are real people who are affected by these things, whether we like it or not. We can't say representation matters and then not mean it. So yeah, more Black people and everything, because I love seeing Black people. But also understand that our absence also means something. And if you're going to say, okay, well, you are absent in this thing, quote, justifiable, end quote, reasons only, like just to be like, there are no Black people in Japan. No, guys, like, yeah. Like, no.
I've seen even Black fans say things like that. It's compelling to say, and you're trying to be understanding of their culture, like, oh yeah, it's a homogenous culture, da 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 da. But I'm like, I promise you, multicultural families are on the rise. They already exist, and those numbers are on the rise. So y'all are gonna have to square with that one day. And like, it's not up to me; it's up to them to square with that. I'm not gonna lead that conversation. It wouldn't be right for Americans to lead that conversation. But that's also what I want to see. I want to see those stories because I'm so curious, especially for me as like a mixed person. I'm like, there's mixed people over there living in a completely different context that I don't know anything about. Like,
nothing about.
Yeah. What is it like to be biracial in Korea? Like, what is that like? Or in Japan, China, wherever. I want to see that on screen so badly. Like, my deepest desire is to have a K-drama that is about a biracial Black girl. Like, that's my dream. But you'd also have to have someone biracial write it. And I'm like, ooh, 2 in 1 already? That seems like a tall order.
It's really hard because, again, the access that we have, it all goes back to what is happening on the back end with the decision makers, right? Like, who knows who would write that? And who knows who would star in it? And would they be protected? Because again, anti-Blackness is really a thing. And if we can hardly ever see like a dark-skinned like K-drama lead, period.
Yeah. What Mars means is Korean lead, like dark-skinned Korean.
A Korean,
person.
Darker Korean person.
Yeah.
And again, we don't know a lot of the nuances as to why a lot of the decisions and the choices are made. Like, I will never forget, what was I watching? There is a K-drama on Netflix where one of the characters has like these nasty, gross, like dread.
Oh, was it Backstreet Rookie?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, and he like smelly.
I didn't watch it because
and weird, and he's the only one that's tanned.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh. See, again, it comes back to that colorism. It's like, again, if you can't even kind of get a grip on how you're already associating a darker skin tone with like more negative things. And then again, the cultural and political nuance of their unique histories as countries and like their unique, between Japan and Korea and their unique histories between each other, like as a region and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yep.
And again, from my perspective, sometimes you don't even understand the propaganda that you're accidentally ingesting because it's not propaganda that's being literally spoken in your language because you don't understand it. And like, there are anime where somebody will be like, oh yeah, that's a reference to Korean people. It's super offensive. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
It's like, I just thought this was a Tanner character. Oh, this character is supposed to be Korean. And then they're like really specifically like stereotypical in ways that it's like, because in my head, it's basically like the anti-Blackness trigger trying to translate. It's like, this anti-Blackness? I'm like, no, it's not anti-Blackness, but I feel weird.
But it's something.
It's something going on. Right? Like you're like
the alarm bells are ringing.
Right. And then of course it takes having more cultural context via someone else that you're like, oh my God, yeah. Okay. And so no wonder you can't even kind of get a grasp on what it is like to have even a Black person around, because within your intra-racial politics and then like intra-regional politic and history, you have a lot to unpack, and it's present in your media, just as, all of our biases and all the things influence our imaginations and end up on page or on screen in ways that we didn't expect, or sometimes on purpose. So it's very like, okay, wow, dang, y'all. We got a long way to go, but I believe in us.
We got a long way to go.
I believe in us. I do.
In my lifetime. It could be when I'm old and gray, but in my lifetime.
In my lifetime, I'm finna see. And again, like, huge shout out to the people who are sitting in the margins, even within like the creating of this media. Like, it's one thing for your work to be loved, which I know a lot of us are struggling with. Our work is beloved and we are not getting what we need on the back end. So solidarity with them wherever and whoever they may be.
Absolutely. Something I try to urge people to remember is like, we can only come at things from the context that we come at them. And that's okay. And that's actually how it should be. But you got to understand, what's your context? Where's your limitations as a Black fan? And I think that's how we can fan more responsibly in general, is knowing like, I don't go here. I can't speak on this, but I can listen and learn in this area. And I think it's really easy to get sidetracked when you get into fandom because you're so excited to be here. You're new here. Everything's wonderful, and that's how people like kind of go overboard. That's a little bit of a tangent, but my question is, what advice would you give to a Black fan coming into these spaces completely brand new now in 2023?
Oh, yes. I mean, beyond, again, like your point about listening and learning, number one, find your folks.
Period.
It's gonna be hard because, again, all skin folk ain't necessarily kinfolk. That's not a shot at anybody in particular. It's just that some people,
it's just true.
It's just true. Some people run along, fandoms in ways that are just not going to be your vibe, and that is okay. Some people are going to like things that you are not a fan of, and as long as nobody's getting hurt, which again, that definition of quote, nobody getting hurt, end quote, is where I think a lot of us get caught up.
Yeah.
As long as no one's like actually coming to harm, it's not worth getting your blood pressure up. Number 3, do not fight online, y'all. I know it's so tempting.
We all mess up with it too sometimes, but do your best.
As a person who grew up fighting online, you don't want to do that to your brain. You don't want to do that to your spirit. You don't want to taint your enjoyment of things with other people's frustrations as well. Like, within reason, have discussion, have discourse, of course, because it is also a powerfully wonderful thing to bond over the things we love, but then also pick them apart to their smallest parts with other people. That is not a bad thing. And I would argue that that is just human nature, is as much as we delight in the creation of art, the critique and the taking apart of art in order to take parts of it to then make something else, that is sacred work. And fandom is part of that. It really, really is. But also know, like, sometimes it's just not worth it. Like, take a step back. Also, 4, always have things that you enjoy in private.
Yes. Huge advice.
Always have things that you were like, I love this thing right here, and I'm going to make sure I am not in the fandom for it. It will save you so much time, energy, and also You are a special little human and a special little being who deserves to have a really special relationship to something that you love. Be sacred and be private.
Mm.
And I know that's like a loaded piece of advice because people are like, Mars, are you telling people to like watch problematic stuff in secret? No. No, I'm saying, but I mean, also if you want to,
yeah, I guess
again,
if you want.
it's none of my business. It really is not. But like, perfect example, people know, of course, my background is all Marvel books. Like, you're gonna see like a bunch of D&D. They know I love D&D. They know I love Marvel. People know I love anime. But like, I also, this is not technically fandom, but like, I also like deeply enjoy astrophysics. And I deeply enjoy marine biology, right? And I don't necessarily need to be super entrenched in like the online and digital spaces that are doing those things. It's not a perfect one-to-one example, but you can just have that for yourself. Like, you can just have that little piece of you. You can have the TV show that you didn't tell anybody you watched, but it changed your life. Like, you can do that. Definitely have that for yourself. And then number 5, it's very much like, remember also who you are when you are not a fan.
Sorry, I just Mufasa played in my head.
Oh my God, yeah. Remember who you are.
Who you are.
And then sometimes I like hear Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda being like, show them who you are. Like every single time, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta be powerful. But like, remember who you are outside of being a fan. Like, when you don't, when you're not talking about all these things that we love to talk about, like, actually, who are you? And hold on to that person, because you can't be fan you all of the time. Because, not to get dragged by Stan Twitter, but I think all the parts about Stan Twitter that we are kind of all really like, oh my God, y'all are kind of wildin'. I think that's what happens when we forget that at the end of the day, these things are imaginary, or the art that is actual, the music we enjoy and all these things, they're meant to be either enjoyed or not enjoyed, and then you can just leave it. Like, you can just leave that, and you can step outside of your fandom of a thing and be kind and still be wonderful and still be thoughtful and powerful and smart. Your entire personality and your entire sense of self cannot come from the things you consume, because we didn't know any of that when we were babies, yet we still exist, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, be who you are for your pride. Anyway, sorry. It's been stuck in my head. Like, be who you are outside of, I like this comic and I'm like this and I'm this and da da and I'm so and so Stan. Like, no, remember who you are for real as a person. And those are probably my biggest 5. Learn a lot, keep some stuff for yourself, always remember who you are, and don't be running around with certain circles. Then you have to determine who those circles are for yourself. People can like be like, hey, but at the same time, you are the person. Like, curate your own experience. Essentially, how all of those kind of thesis statement all together.
Absolutely. I will say, even I, to this day, well, with each new fandom, that you got to do that work over again. Like, I have, a good group of friends and just general nerdy people in my life now that I'm like, hey, you into this? But when there's something none of them are into, I'm like, oh, gotta go back out here into the streets.
Literally, it's like dating.
Find the people. Yeah,
it really is like dating.
Yeah, it really is. And I still, to this day, I enter Discords and I'm like, oop, never mind, back right back on out. The same for me.
That's not for me, beloveds, but y'all have a good time. Seriously, it took me.
Yeah.
I was like, Steven Universe. I actually watched it and then was like, I will watch this, and I do not want to be in the fandom. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. This is just super cute and I feel really warm and fuzzy. And that's all right. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't need necessarily to do that to still have a good time. But again, I am very much also in my like, do more things alone era. So I think this
Love
is probably
that for
just
you,
kind of
bestie.
like, thank you. It's very much like, oh my God, go watch that movie by yourself, because you want to curate your own enjoyment of the thing before you commiserate with other people. So I'm in the habit of like seeing things twice, because I want to see it first with myself and kind of sit with how the art or the thing, resonates with me. Then I'll go see it with other people, because both of these are very sacred practices in my head. It's like the art with the self and the art with the community, both very wonderful, 2 sides of the same coin, but you cannot have one without the other, because that's how you get into some trouble, or you end up really lonely, and that's not great either.
Yeah, I would say it's about balance. It's you got to do both. You have to have fandom and community, but you also have some fandoms for yourself. Like, Our Flag Means Death. I loved it, kind of peeked into the fandom and was like, I think I'm good on that. And it's just something I kind of enjoy about myself. And there's some stuff I don't even talk about online. I'm like, y'all will never know that I even like it, because that's how much I'm keeping it to myself.
Yep.
You got to do both. I really love that advice because it's something I believe in wholeheartedly, because it goes together, right? If you start over identifying with fandom you, and then all of your fandoms are in fandom, there's nothing left of you outside. Yep. Having something to yourself, it's like you said, it's very sacred. It's a different experience when it's to yourself, but it's also something that, if all else fails, keeps you plugged into who you are and connected to who you are outside of fandom spaces. Wonderful advice. Gold star advice, I will say. I was going to, maybe I'll switch it up a little bit and say, what is your favorite Asian pop culture media that you've watched recently? We'll put the recently caveat on it.
Oh, recently? Okay, so I actually was on a 4-month break from watching anime just for like a cleanse, and then I ended up missing the entire spring season. And now summer is kicking off, but I managed to watch in a single day. I managed to watch all of Hell's Paradise.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that.
And I was deeply fascinated by it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this show is odd. And also, like, as a person who was like learning screenwriting and stuff, I'm also learning to consume anime as a screenwriter and like as a person who, if I had to write this as a script, how would I have written it? And then also deeply appreciating anime as, of course, an adaptation of graphic work, an adaptation of manga, an adaptation of a webtoon or wherever it is. And so I happened to hear about Hell's Paradise from someone else, and it's a little bloodier than I typically watch. Like, I typically don't actually watch super violent like anime, mostly because I don't do well with blood and gore.
Okay.
But I've been getting better at it recently because, again, I watched Vinland Saga, I watched Golden Kamuy, which is coming back, thank God. But Hell's Paradise was something else. Like, I was like, oh, whoa, this is strange. And I managed to watch it in a single day because I happened to say, okay, I'm going to jump back on the anime wagon today. And it was the season finale, and it was only 13 episodes. So I got to zip through to the end, and it was like the season finale came out today. So I got to speed run the whole thing, and I deeply enjoyed it. I really did. I mean, I also love anything that subverts religion in a really interesting way. And also the entire first episode was just like, it really just jumped right into it. And then the hero's journey is basically like, I love my wife.
Wait, that's what it's
no spoilers, but like literally the impetus for his entire journey is, I love my wife and I want to get back to her. And I'm like, oh no. Okay. Now the show does completely just like flip everything on its head. But like when I'm thinking about heroes' journeys, I want to be king of the pirates, and I'm going to be Hokage, and I'm going to be Wizard King. Like,
I mean, it's fine.
They're fine. They're fine. And, or we're going to be high school, we're going to go to Inter High and be champions. Like, those sorts of heroes' journeys, very used to. But this one, I was like, wow, he has fun powers and he loves his wife. Slay. Like, let's go.
It was a recommendation for anybody, but I'm like, oh, let me personally just jot that down real quick.
So yeah, I will say that was what I really enjoyed recently.
Everybody take note.
I cried my eyes out, but
okay, also noted.
Yep.
One of them. Okay, gotta go with the right mindset. I see. Okay.
Oh, and I also loved To Your Eternity, which that one will make you cry your whole face out. But To Your Eternity was also very good. Amazing story.
Okay, we're crying today. Okay, cool. It's crying season. Honestly, though,
it's cancer season too.
It really is. Wait a minute, because like all the anime and K-dramas, this is an aside, all the anime and K-dramas coming out right now, they all have kind of like that vibe to them. A lot of them do. I'm like, is it crying season? Is it because they know it's cancer season? Do they realize what they've done?
I don't know.
Before we jet,
wait, what are your favorites? Sorry,
okay, sure. Favorite things that I've watched recently?
Yeah.
Oh, child. Ooh. I feel like we had a K-drama dry spell, honestly. I don't really have any like big K-drama recommendations. Except right now I don't like to recommend K-dramas I'm currently watching because they could go left real quick.
Left. Oh my gosh.
Real quick on you. But with that caveat, and since you already know how it be, I'm watching See You In My 19th Life, I think it's what it's
Oh,
called.
I read the webtoon for that one.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Like, it is shaping up potentially. Like, I can already get the vibes that I'm like, this might be my K-drama of the year. I can just, the vibes. It's made me cry already. I'm like, oh, I'm not even a big crier. So the fact that it already like got tears out of me, I'm like,
The webtoon is delightful. So the show is going to be.
Okay. Yeah. I would say that is up there currently. I've already recommended it on the pod several times, but if y'all haven't watched Romantic Killer, it's so good. And it hasn't been renewed. They've said nothing about it. It's an anime. They've said nothing about it. It's so annoying. When you were talking about like how animation across the board is getting no respect, that was the anime that came to my head. I'm like, I know. No respect.
Is that on Netflix?
It's on Netflix, Romantic Killer.
Gosh,
it's not that long. It's so good. It's so funny, but deals with some pretty serious topics at the same time. It's the reverse harem trope, but it's like turning it on its head. That's all I'll say. It's very good. Highly recommend.
I
You
will
should watch
try it. Yeah, because there's so many animation projects on Netflix specifically that I'm like, is this coming back or should I be preparing my heart? Like Blood of Zeus, where is she?
I set myself up on that one because I specifically had stopped watching anime on like Netflix anime specifically, which I know it's like, but you should support it. But I'm like, but they never renew. Like, you just are setting yourself up for heartbreak.
My heart can't take it anymore.
And sure enough, I sure did do it to myself again. Let me tell you what. But I highly recommend it. It's very funny and still worth it, even if they never renew it.
Okay.
I'll cry, but still worth it. Okay. With that, thank you for coming on to the show. Tell the good folks where they can find you and what you got in the works.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter, as long as it exists, at Mars in Charge. We both
got something coming up.
Yeah, we're both going to be on a panel for a campaign launch called Be a Hero with Fandom Forward. Going to be with Abigail Disney and Sis. And we are going to be just talking about how fandoms can support Disney workers. And this is such a timely conversation considering so many industries are really kind of, people are really in the streets being like, we really, really need industries to change and be different if the people who are creating our magic and writing our TV shows that we love and sweeping up after us in the amusement parks so that we can have a good time. These people deserve respect and livable wages, and they need to be heard. And so how can fandoms mobilize to support them and support the media that we love? Stay tuned. We're going to find that out, a little bit of it on July 18th at 7:30. So we will drop a link so that people can RSVP.
If you're listening to it, the day it drops, that's tomorrow, July 18th. It's going to be at 7:30. I will put the link in the show notes. I will also share it on Culture by Culture socials, but also my socials. So please drop by. I know you don't really cover Disney stuff, but I know if you're a nerd, there's a lot of overlap, and it's just cool to support workers in the industry if you can. That's what they're all asking us to do, and that's what we want to do. We want to give them a voice. So it'll be a panel. It'll be fun, and Abigail Disney's going to be there. What the heck? That's going to be cool.
Arguably the coolest person with the last name Disney to ever exist.
Period. Like, I think we can all agree. And if you don't know who she is, check her out. Check out her documentary. All of that good stuff. But until the panel, thank you all so much for listening. You'll find me at the panel. Link in the show notes. Go check out Mars. Their links will be in the show notes. And until next time, keep it chill and keep it nerdy.
Yay.
Bye.